for the woman.
Yeah, it has to be some form.
Donald Trump's answer to Chris Matthews in March of 2016 on the issue of abortion.
Well, and as you say, Mika, Donald Trump followed through on that because women are now being punished across America.
Thank you, Chris, who joins us now for getting that answer, along with professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude Jr., and special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly John Fast. She's an MSNBC political analyst. And Chris, the punishment is quite severe. What we found is that in many states now, we have seen women being put in situations where they face potential death, where they're being told to bleed out or wait until they're bleeding out, a lot of pain, the potential, and in many cases it's already happened, sterilization, because they are forced to bring babies that are have major abnormalities and will die to full term. Trauma for the woman, trauma for the woman's family, trauma for the other children in the family, and you know what? Extra punishment from Donald Trump to other women who aren't even pregnant but might need an abortion-like procedure, a DNC or a terminate, something to help, and they won't be able to get that, so they get punished too. So Donald Trump has done some great work in following through on his promise.
And what about 10-year-old girls that are raped by illegal immigrants who have to flee the state? 13-year-old girls who are forced to have babies because their mothers think you know
that happened.
That they have to do it. I mean, it's just it's not. It's the suffering and the punishment that Donald Trump is exacting on women of all ages is really shocking.
You know, there was something in the instinct of his answer there where he said there needs to be some form of punishment. I think when he got rid of Roe v. Wade by naming the 3 new justices, he opened up the door to this, to everything, to the 14 states you mentioned, Miko, that outlaw abortion, and the states that make it very difficult, the 6-week ban. He changed the conversation. It's now about real pro-choice.
Yeah.
It's now about getting rid of all the bans. The fact that he would not support any ban at all, that when he went through his calculations for the last couple of weeks, remember, he was thinking through this. Yeah. Do I do a 16-week? Do I do any of this? He decided not to do it because it's changed. The conversation has changed. Anyone who supports a ban is on the other side. Right now, even 16 weeks, which would have been considered, well, negotiable at least at one point, but not now. So he's changed the whole conversation to what's going on in Arizona and to the 1860s bill. And, you know, I think his instinct, though, of punishment, you know, and it does fit a lot of the things with him, the way he thinks about it, about women. And, you know, when he makes fun of the women that he had relations with, apparently, with Stormy and E. Jean Carroll.
Makes fun of women's looks.
He says you're horse-faced, and he comes up with phrases like nicknames. Why is he coming up with them? Why does he just say, I didn't do it or something? He goes on the offensive. And I think with that, by the way, he's never taken that back.
No.
He's never said, I made a mistake, because he never says I make a mistake. No. He doesn't say, I make mistakes. I shouldn't have said that. I was thinking wrong. I had a bad attitude that day or something. He chose to say that. And the pro-life movement, as we know, I grew up with it, basically never supported any kind of punishment of the woman. So that was him, just him.
And this comes to us courtesy, Molly, of Judge William Howell. In 1864, a judge, again, appointed by Abraham Lincoln. So that's, I mean, you say it and you almost have to laugh, but it's reality now, been delivered to us. And there's punishment, 2 to 5 years in prison for anybody who administers an abortion.
What's so interesting about what's happening right now in the Arizona State House is that Democrats are still trying, even though this law will ultimately serve them in a swing state, they are still trying to get it overturned, and Republicans are still fighting with them. And I think it's such an interesting moment because, remember, there was a border bill, right? There was a border bill all cooked up, and Donald Trump said to Mike Johnson, no, do not pass this border bill. I need to run on the border. And then here we have Arizona, where this bill will actually ultimately serve the don't want women to die. We don't want to live like this. And so I do think that that's a really interesting dynamic.
All right. Trump spoke with reporters in Atlanta yesterday, and he's going all over the place with his position on abortion because he realized the storm is coming. He said he would not sign a federal abortion ban, reversing a promise that he made as a candidate back in 2016. And just days after saying abortion policy should be left to the states, he then criticized Arizona's Supreme Court, saying it went too far and doing exactly what he said it should do, restricting abortion access. Take a look.
Did Arizona go too far? Yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And as you know, it's all about states' rights. That'll be straightened out. And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason, and that will be taken care of, I think, very quickly. Florida is probably maybe going to change also. See, it's all of it's the will of the people. This is what I've been saying. It's a perfect system. So Florida's probably going to change. Arizona's going to definitely change. Everybody wants that to happen. And you're getting the will of the people. It's been pretty amazing when you think.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
That's
He's
fantastic.
whistling past a political graveyard there. Jonathan Lemire and others reporting that the Trump campaign is in meltdown mode now. They know he screwed up royally going out giving that speech. He was going to talk about a 15-week or a 16-week ban, and then he pulled back from that, didn't have the guts to do that. So he's trying to be all things to all people. And in abortion, that means you're nothing to everybody. And so here, Donald Trump is going to run in Florida with a 6-week campaign, a 6-week abortion ban politically wrapped around his neck. In Arizona, he's going to be doing the same thing with a 160-year abortion ban following behind him, whether they eventually repeal it or not. But that's even questionable. You know, I remind our viewers that Republicans in Wisconsin had an opportunity before the most important Supreme Court election in recent time to repeal a total abortion ban that was put in place when John Tyler was president, and they didn't do it. And they paid the price. So I don't know. We'll see if Arizona Republicans decide to keep this 160-year ban on the books.
Well, if they don't, we're going to see a lot more money having to be spent in Arizona, right? Because we're going to see a lot of money having to be spent in Florida, even though people say Florida will be in play. But we know they're going to have to spend a lot more money.
Let me tell you something. I hear people say Florida's going to be in play. Just let me correct this. And I know there are a lot of Florida Republicans that hope Democrats play in Florida. 2022 happened because Democrats didn't put anything on the field. Charlie Crist was out there, and it was like King David pulling all the troops back from Uriah. Like the Democratic Party did not show up. They didn't spend a dime. They ceded the state. And by the way, Donald Trump won that state by about 3.5 points against Joe Biden. So again, we'll see what happens with the 6-week abortion ban. I always found Florida, even in my very conservative district, they're very conservative. There are a lot of military people who'd flown all around the world who didn't like the idea of the federal government telling them what they could or couldn't do with their bodies.
That libertarian strand in the Republican Party.
That libertarian strand across Florida. Those independents, ton of independents in Florida, they ain't right-wing religious voters. They are more libertarian, more small government independents.
So, Joe, what do you see as the relationship between there's Trump in his position or whatever he thinks he's thinking about abortion, but then I'm thinking about the dominionist. I'm thinking about that judge in Alabama who was a Seven Mountains mandate guy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this group of folk who are actually pushing this legislation. So there's Trump who made overturning Roe v. Wade possible. And then there are those folks who are actually pushing these draconian laws across the board. What do we do with them and their presence in our politics and in the Republican Party?
If you're a Democratic campaign person, you say go for it, because you're going to lose. You're going to lose because they are not the 50%. They're not even the 33%. Like Donald Trump, Chris, Donald Trump loathes those people. I've been saying it for as long as I've known him. He loathes those people. He's always loathed them. He used to mock privately right-wing religious extremists. He hates those people, and he always has. That's why when 22 went down, he blamed it on pro-life voters. Trump blamed 22 on pro-life voters. Right. He's got no use for them. And so here he finds himself in a position where, again, these people are going to determine, whether he gets reelected or not, and he doesn't like it.
Well, he's caught in the crosswinds here. Look at him he's still taking credit for getting rid of Roe v. Wade. He's out there bashing away, saying, I put these 3 judges in there, I changed the Supreme Court around, and we got rid of that law. Now,
and he thought that's where he's dumb enough to think that's where it would stop. It never stops.
It's dynamic.
Give them the little taste of it. They're going to keep on going. They want more and more and more. More extreme, and this is what he did not realize. They'll never be happy.
Well, Biden's position on this one is rather sane. He doesn't say free choice, there's no rules. There's no rules about late term or anything else. He says, let's go back to Roe v. Wade. Let's go back to something that was a pretty good compromise because people could live with it. They said, it's much more on the side of the woman making the decision for the first 6 months. But at the end, there is some societal concerns there. So we'll bring that in. So the court decision made sense, politically. It made sense politically. And now Trump is back saying, well, I want all the credit in the world for getting rid of Roe v. Wade. At the same time, don't blame me for the consequences. What? That's what politics is. It's consequences. You make decisions to go into Iraq or you don't go into Iraq. You have consequences. Now you have states that are hard right. And there are men in these state legislatures that are willing to screw the women and basically, we're going to go totally anti-abortion. Just do it. Just right now. They would vote right now to completely outlaw in those 14 states. And the other states, 6 weeks, which men have only recently learned you don't know whether you're pregnant or not. That's right. One of the revelations of this conversation for men. And they're out there. And Biden, but see, Trump needs anger. He only has one reflexive American concern. And there is anger about inflation and the border and things like that. I have to make anger work for me. So how does he make anger work for him with all these states outlawing abortion? It doesn't work.
Who's going to want to go to college in Arizona? Who's going to want to go on vacation in Arizona? Who, if you're a woman of childbearing age or a woman who wants health care, doesn't even need to be pregnant, who's going to want to go work in Arizona?
Yeah, Mika, that's certainly a big issue for us. President Biden has taken steps that's going to create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs in the clean energy and semiconductor industry. And now we have this hanging over us. At the same time, Joe just pointed out Florida being a military state. Well, so are we. I served in the Navy for 25 years. I mean, when you serve in the military, you don't get a choice as to where you go.
Right.
So folks are going to be, they're going to be, these are orders. You're sent to a state. And if you're a woman or you're a spouse of a service member who's a woman, your health care is going to be at risk. In some cases, literally, your lives will be at risk.
Hi, Senator Kelly. It's Molly Jong-Fast. I'm curious, when you are talking about this, what we've seen in states like Louisiana is OBGYNs afraid to treat in the first trimester. So I'm curious, is there anything you guys can do? You do have a Democratic governor. You have you don't have a Democratic legislature, but you do have some Democrats. Is there anything you can do to tell OBGYNs, gynecologists, that they're safe to treat, that they have some protection? Is there anything you can do to protect these women before November?
Yeah, Molly, I've spoken to CEOs of hospitals about this, about their interactions with their own staff. OBGYNs who are, you're right, they're scared because of the ramifications of this law that is 2 centuries old. 1864 could throw them in jail for 2 to 5 years. Doctors are scared. So I've talked to CEOs about specific cases where a woman was going into they didn't want to treat the woman until she was nearing sepsis. I mean, that puts that woman's life literally at risk. You ask, what can we do? Well, the legislature could pass a repeal of this 1864 law. They could have done it yesterday. They didn't. There was chaos at our state legislature. They adjourned because they knew the votes were actually there. There are a few Republicans and the Democrats that would repeal this draconian law Didn't happen yesterday. We have other options. And we have a ballot initiative. It'll be on the ballot in November. My hope is that codifies what was essentially available for 50 years under Roe. And this is going to be, sort of a big deal for our election.
Senator Kelly, this is Eddie Glaude. I wanted to ask that question. I mean, we can talk about the actual existential implications of these draconian laws, its impact on women, but let's just talk politics for a moment. What will this mean for the presidential election in Arizona? Do you think it will energize Arizona voters? What role will women play, in your view, in the outcome, determining the outcomes of Arizona for this election?
Well, first of all, let me be clear. My biggest concern here is the health care of women in our
Absolutely.
state. I've got a daughter in our state. I've got a granddaughter now. And this is a disaster, and it is a huge change from what the status quo was under Roe. But this is going to be on the ballot. It looks like the signatures are there, and I suspect that it's going to drive a lot of women that might not normally vote to come out and vote for Joe Biden. Because, I mean, let's be clear, this Supreme Court ruling in Arizona said Dobbs 22 times. It might as well said Donald Trump. And folks in Arizona are going to understand that. And my hope is that they make a choice for change. And Joe Biden is going to fight.
You know, he says out loud that he would be a dictator and that he is your retribution to his voters. He says a lot of the quiet part out loud, even the frightening part out loud. He also has a campaign construct that now has his daughter-in-law built in. There are a lot of different factors to this that didn't exist the first time around.
That's right, Mika. You know, everyone here on this show has been covering Trump for years. And the big story in 2016 and to some extent 2020 was that his campaign was a soap opera. It was clashing personalities. It was nonstop drama. And covering this cycle, the thing that I've been struck by time and time again is that it's really a low drama campaign. These are operatives who are focused, who don't want press, who don't want their egos out there. They are focused on getting Donald Trump into the White House in November 2024, because as I write in the piece, his freedom is at stake. Really, the only thing that is guaranteed to keep Donald Trump out of jail is becoming the next president of the United States and appointing an attorney general who will get these charges thrown out. It's really that simple. And I think that is really why you see Donald Trump so focused. And yes, he says incendiary things on the stump, but when it comes to the mechanics of running the campaign, it is a much different operation.
Well, and of course, the campaign, I mean, insiders on the campaign have told me that their goal is to basically minimize him as much as possible, keep his mouth shut, stop him from blowing himself up every day.
That's right. You know, he every time he opens his mouth, he creates a news cycle. You know, at the fundraiser this weekend, we saw headlines that he said, "Why don't we have more immigrants from, quote, nice countries?" And all the countries he happened to mention were, majority white populations. You know, he says the quiet part out loud. This is a candidate who does create his own controversies, but, that really is baked in now, I think, to his brand. And I think the mechanics, the underlying ground game, getting the state parties in line, getting the Republican National Committee in line is really, I think, what is fueling this, success that he's had on the campaign trail. And now it's apparently he's got the money behind him as well.
Yeah, and Gabriel, we both noted that despite his public proclamations that he'd happily be Nelson Mandela and go to jail, he's actually terrified of that prospect, and that fuels a lot of these unhinged Truth Social rants. Isaac, congrats on the book. So let's take this conversation and broaden out a little bit of what you're writing about, the MAGA movement writ large, with in many ways Steve Bannon and others as sort of the intellectual heft behind it. What are some of their goals? How do they hope to use Trump to accomplish what they want?
Well, Gabriel mentioned the ground game, and that's a huge part of what this book is about. What happened, the way that the movement regrouped from January 6th, going into the party structure itself, starting at the bottom, at the precinct level, going all the way up through the counties, the districts, the states, getting to the RNC, making it possible to get a new chair and co-chair who would even be Trump's own daughter-in-law. And whatever's going on at the Trump campaign, whatever's going on with the Trump trial, that organization is going to be out there in the field focusing on looking for voter fraud and also for getting out the vote among Trump supporters. And that is a huge part of making him a more formidable candidate than he's been in the past.
So, Rev, I'm going to pitch you a softball and just let you weigh in on your thoughts about Donald Trump comparing himself to Nelson Mandela.
Well, that is a softball. I hope the bases are loaded. But, you know, the insult of that is that Nelson Mandela did 27 years in jail to, among other things, get blacks in South Africa the right to vote. Donald Trump is facing jail for denying blacks and others the right to vote. I mean, he's a direct opposite of Nelson Mandela if he goes to jail. And I might say, by the way, Donald, if you're watching, Mandela did 27 years, if that's what you want. In that, if you want to equal him there's a lot of people wouldn't be disappointed. But I think that what caught my eye, Isaac, about your book, because I think some of us that consider ourselves progressive, me and the civil rights side of that, failed to really build. We're trying to work on this now with Nash Action Network, an infrastructure. Talk more about how they redid themselves and went from the bottom, very local, very grassroots, up, because I think that's underestimated in all of the flash we see of Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very under the radar, and it's just in the past few years. It's really since Trump left office that this has been happening. And Steve Bannon had a huge part in this by popularizing this idea called the precinct strategy, which was exactly that, starting at the bottom, at the precincts, and going up in the party organization itself. This was the innovation over the Tea Party, which was like, you know, everyone go to this Tea Party meeting, you know, this Tea Party, that Tea Party. And the idea here was, no, we have the Republican Party, and we're going to use the Republican Party organization, the Republican Party structure. There's real power in that. There's money, there's volunteers, there's infrastructure. That is the infrastructure that all the candidates use. And they're not, the motivation for that, which has a lot of truth in it, actually, is that the reason that Trump failed.
I want to go to Jim Vandehei, despite the fact that he believed
Let's
David
go for the good stuff.
I'm with David McIntosh. not that I hold grudges, but 28 years ago, let David McIntosh give him some bogus information about me off the record, then ran it roll call. But I don't keep score. I don't keep score. But I agree with Vandehei, so I want to go to him despite that. So, Jim.
Just stick to the good stuff, Joe.
Yes, Joe. Jim, I'm looking at your latest masterwork, and it cuts against everything we hear in politics today. Everything. But, you know, Meek and I have given speeches around this country in years past before we became hermits, and we still get out a good bit. We are surrounded in our life by people who support Donald Trump. We don't understand why they support Donald Trump, but you get beneath that, right? Yeah. You get past the and I call it surface tribalism, the tribalism, and you start asking them basic questions, and you start talking about America, and you start complaining about whether it's crime or the, you know, whatever it is. We could say Roe v. Wade. I mean, we could talk about all these things, and you get beneath the surface. And what is so surprising is how much people agree. Like, I've always said it, whether I'm talking to a mom or a dad on the Upper West Side or Demopolis, Alabama, I'm not being a hokey. They want the same thing for the kids. Chances are good they feel the same about a ton of issues. Now, you step into the whole political sphere, and then when it's Trump versus Hillary, then Trump versus, then suddenly things separate. But Americans are a lot. That's why when I hear Civil War, I go, please, they'll take it out on the football field on Friday night.
No doubt. And I do the same thing as you do. Like, you travel, you try to talk to people, who are really partisan, try to get beneath the surface. And I increasingly have come to the conclusion that 70 to 80% of people are actually normal. They're not all worked up about the things that people get worked up about. And that the reality of it is that we really have been in this distortion machine. Like, if you're on Twitter or X all day, if you're living on TikTok, or you're marinating in even some of the topics that we deal deal with every day. What happens is the people who have the loudest voices, who often say the most provocative things, tend to dominate that conversation. And it leaves you thinking like, wait, does everyone think this? Does everyone feel this? Is everyone so worked up that they're about to, maybe conduct a civil war to defend their party versus the other? And you realize, no, like most people actually have a life. Most people aren't making politics of the beer you drink or the store that you shop at. And most, one of the examples I use in there is like, I go to church. I know tons of people that are Catholics, Christians, name every different denomination. Like most people aren't like thinking that Trump is sent from God to offer salvation to the people. Like, are there fringe people who think nutty things? Yes. Have there always been fringe people who think nutty things? Absolutely. But what's different is there's just a new way to amplify that through social media, sometimes through the most partisan people on cable, and certainly through these tribal battles that we see at the base of the two parties. But that's just, I don't think America. There's a great AP poll out last week that basically asked both parties, do you believe in freedom of speech and freedom to petition and freedom to live the way you want to live? And like almost every Democrat and every Republican, looking back at the founding principles of the Constitution, they agree with all of it. Yes, they disagree on the edges about how you're going to actually turn that into public policy. But I think that there's a reason we're all wondering, is this real? Because it's not clear what's real, especially when people are getting information in so many different realities, right? Your kids on TikTok, you and I maybe through the New York Times, Morning Joe, Axios, other publications. But if you're a Trumper, you might be getting it through podcasts that most people have never heard of. Or if you're, a tech bro, you might be watching or listening to All In and getting your news from Elon Musk. It's just very distorting. And I think it's important to remind people that I do think the country is mostly sane.
Jim, I couldn't agree more. I'm so glad you wrote this piece. I call them the normies. It's when you're out in the world at the grocery store on the sideline of a basketball game, or you're at church, or you're doing anything that normal people do, which is the vast majority of the country. They are not frothing at the mouth about so much of what we hear about on social media and on TV sometimes. But what I think gets some people is many of the normies that we live with and know and like to consider ourselves to be in many ways, they do vote in many cases, 74 million of them last time, for someone who so violates so much of what they stand for. Whether you're an evangelical Christian or you're somebody who believes that January 6th was a terrible day or that you shouldn't terminate the Constitution, all those things, that's where the friction comes in a little bit. We agree on so much, and yet you're willing to put your vote forward for someone who disagrees with so much of what you're about.
Yeah, politics has become very toxic, and certainly Donald Trump has made it more toxic, given the words that he uses, the issues that he takes advantage of. He sees what we see in this reality distortion machine. He's been a master at it. But I've never thought that he's the cause. He's a symptom of it, maybe a big symptom of it. But a lot of this stuff exists nonetheless. But when you talk to those Trump supporters, like when you get outside of the big cities, you talk to them and you really push them on what they believe. Like, yeah, maybe they're telling a pollster they think the election was stolen, but the more you talk to them, they don't really feel that. They just think that they don't trust anything. They don't trust institutions. They don't trust the media. So it's kind of like a middle finger to pollsters, the media, and to politics in general. And by the way, if you really thought that the election was stolen, if like tens of millions of people, you would just passively say, oh, yeah, it was stolen. I'm not going to do anything about it. You'd storm the streets if you actually believed in your bones in large numbers that was the truth. And that's the tribal nature that you're seeing in politics.